Welcome, everyone, to Verdusco Talks Business. I'm Raul Verdusco, and today we're joined by Barb Boldt, founder of Boldt Global, uh, executive communication coach, speaker, and someone who has spent years helping leaders, especially in technology and professionals, become more confident, clear, and persuasive communicators. Barb brings a global perspective from working across dozens of countries, and her work sites right at the intersection of leadership, communication, and business influence. Barb, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Raul, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, Barb, obviously we've known each other for a bit. I'm so glad you came on, and as I mentioned off off camera, you are definitely a powerhouse in this area.
Let's just say I'm of a certain age and I've been around a while. So yeah, I've got a lot of experience.
So, Barb, I just wanted to start off with a quick question. So, for people just meeting you, what pulled you into this type of work? Why communication coaching, and why this focus on introverts or technology professionals?
Well, it's an interesting story because I always say I came to communication in a slightly different way than most people. Although I do have a degree in intercultural communication, but my whole communication journey started when I expatriated myself to Europe in my mid 30s. It threw me into a culture that I'd never lived in before. I moved to Italy and I learned Italian. I spent 6 months studying the Italian language. And then, as a way of supporting myself, I ended up teaching English. So I got really involved with languages and also became fascinated with communication across cultures. It became obvious to me after not that long teaching English to Italians that there's more to communication than just language. It's also about the culture and what people know and what people believe and how that influences the way they communicate and what they communicate about. So I got really interested in that. As I mentioned, I started a master's degree lived while I lived abroad. It took me a very long time to finish it because it was a long distance learning degree. However, the teaching English and learning Italian, and then I started teaching in universities, and I just really, it came kind of organically, I guess we could say, of helping people whose first language is in English to communicate clearly. I was initially working with a lot of business people who had the need to get their points across and be influential when English was their second language, or sometimes even third or fourth. And then I also taught at a Swiss Federal Technical Institute, a Swiss university, where I had all of these technical students who had never been taught how to communicate effectively. So that's really why I love to work with technical professionals who can tend to be introverted. Not all of them will be, but many of them will be, because they struggle. They really have a hard time getting the energy up and to come out in a room and say what they want to say and get noticed, and so their ideas get traction. And a lot of what I know how to do with those kinds of people I learned in those classrooms with master's level tech students who were getting what was the name of that degree? It was a master's in management of technology and entrepreneurship. That's the program I taught in for 16 years. And they were just so much fun to work with. They were adorable. Uh, and I could help them because they were neophytes. They were really newbies. And it was very gratifying to work with them.
That's really cool. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this before, Barb. I spent some time in Asia, Japan, China, and Korea. And what you're describing is it's actually sound I guess you should say somewhat familiar for me because obviously with my engineering background work with the Asian culture in the engineering field, and usually there was only one or two people that I should put this. It was kind of at times challenging because sometimes the translator didn't understand some of the technical terms to explain, and then there were And if there was somebody there that did understand enough, to be able to explain everything, I could tell they kind of struggled. And you know, um, for me, I kind of relied on, and the best way I could explain it is, even though uh, when I was younger, I used to be able to speak Spanish, and then I took Spanish
Mm.
classes. It was the one thing they taught us was always to, the best way of putting it is kind of like the introduction words, and some of the words weren't adaptable, amongst the two languages. And I was like, okay, I think I'm running into the same problem here. So I have to figure out three or four different ways to saying the same thing to see
Mm.
which one would catch.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I can see where
And
that might be the case. That's interesting.
yeah, so I would say, the same thing three or four times, and then if the third one caught, I'm like, okay, cool, I'm going to explain it this way, and usually it's fine from there.
Those
When
words would work with that interpreter. Wow, that's
Yep.
really interesting. My first international experience was in Japan. I was an exchange student in Japan when I was 17. I wasn't there long enough to learn the language. I was only there for 3 months. I learned very basic. I can still make a good impression in a sushi bar to this day. But I can't speak Japanese. That is a very, very challenging language for
Yeah,
Westerners.
I I can't speak it. I got the nice translator. I downloaded the library, and I was typing simple words like show the waitress or
Right.
uh, whoever to
Yeah.
tell me what to
To
do
get
next.
by. To get
Yep.
by, right? Yeah. Yeah, the brain is actually really interesting related to foreign languages. I just there's a little episode that I talk about in my book that I'm writing about that whole experience of taking the vacation to Italy the first time. I didn't speak Italian. And my first interaction with a person who didn't speak any English, the two languages that my brain went to were German and Japanese because I had studied German and I had had that experience with Japanese, and neither one of them helped me in this, Italian grocery store. It was just weird, but the brain will default to whatever foreign languages it has some knowledge of. There's kind of a hierarchy apparently.
Just to remind our audience, there weren't smartphones back then either. So
Right.
it was,
Exactly.
a book, and that was it.
A little dictionary, a little travel dictionary, and paper maps. I found my way around everywhere, with paper maps. No GPS.
Yep.
We
Yep.
date ourselves.
Yeah, I've used paper maps myself. So, um, so my next question is for you is, you worked a lot with people in the technology, technology is strong. Why is it that someone can be brilliant in the work and still struggle in influencing a team, a boss, or a customer?
That's a really good question, because sometimes people can come across in a communication sense as less intelligent as they are. And it's often related to that introversion extroversion orientation. People who are super smart and super technical and go deep into these technical topics and areas often have that level of concentration that they need to learn what they learn and know what they know, because they do have that introverted tendency, which gives them that ability to focus and concentrate. What happens when they try to then speak out or communicate to others about what they know? One thing that can happen is that they can go into too much detail too soon. That's a very typical mistake that people make. There's a kind of automatic assumption that people know what you know. So you have to find a way to pull yourself back from all of that technical knowledge and say, what does my audience already know and what do they need to know in order to find your starting point, and then not go into too much detail too quickly. If we're talking about influence and persuasion in the American culture, you've got to get people enthused about an idea before they want to know too much more. Once they're engaged and they think, wow, this is cool, then they want to know, and they'll even ask for more information. And that is a cultural thing. There are other cultures who want to know all the detail up front. And the example I typically give is Germany. The German culture, they don't like to be persuaded. They like to be given a whole bunch of information, data, detail, and then convince themselves that this is a good idea, or this is, a new innovation is cool. Does that resonate with you?
Oh my gosh, yes. Because I've worked with Germans in the past, and they're very, I guess you say, strong in their opinion. And obviously, it's a part of the culture. Everyone knows that.
Right.
Obviously, brilliant, brilliant, as in the engineering side of it.
For
And
sure.
a lot of the things you brought up, it, it it's funny because how should I put this? I think back to my time in Asia, and there was, you could tell there was a lot of strong engineers in there, but unfortunately, because of the interpretation, they kind of struggled to communicate, uh, um, you know, I
In
guess
a pro-
clearly, so we could know that okay, this is what they're doing.
right.
And what we found very helpful was pictures or drawings. I
Oh
mean,
yes,
it sounds funny.
images.
Yep,
For sure.
images, drawings really helped,
For sure.
and like, okay, and sometimes it may take 20 or 30 minutes to get there, but you get there. And
Absolutely. I think that's brilliant. Using images to really illustrate what you mean, and especially in a technical field like where something goes or how it will fit in the vehicle or whatever it is, right? I can see where that would work super
yeah,
well.
you know, it's funny. This is kind of off topic, but in the PLC world, in the programming world, um, when everything first started, with PLCs and HMIs, it was the way it kind of tied into it is by numbers, a memory bit. So it
Mm-hmm.
was like M300.0 or something like that. The reason I bring this up is that, obviously technology evolves and everything. Now they call what they call tag-based system, where it's all like the language.
Mm.
So, and at times it can be, I could see it be very, I guess you say, struggling for somebody. So let's say, for example, somebody who's German or Japanese, obviously the languages are very different, but numbers are the same throughout, no matter what language it is.
True. Yes.
And
Right.
so you could see where at least that tie point, they may not have the correct description there, but you at least know where that memory bit is.
Right.
But because sometimes they use that tag base where you just see the names and you're kind of like,
Then you can't read it as easily.
yeah,
Yeah.
it becomes a little bit of a struggle. Well, that's something that obviously not every company runs with that, but just just get my 2 cents in there since we were talking about the different languages and everything.
I've
It just
always
remind me
felt
of
that
that.
you're an engineer, so you can corroborate this for me, but engineers have a certain ability to communicate across cultures because they have engineering in common. And that
Yep.
is very numbers based,
Yep.
right? Calculations and measurements and all of that stuff. So I was always confused as to why big tech companies, or like especially automotive, didn't want more intercultural training. Like, why don't they need more help? And it's because the engineers just manage to communicate amongst themselves, even though maybe the language base, and like you say, you resorted to pictures or images, and that's how you were able to share ideas.
Yeah. Probably another one, just to alluding to your point, is that the good thing is, like say for like example, an automation line, no matter the culture, it pretty much flows the same way. It's kind
Right.
of like a car. They're built the same way no matter what country you go to.
Exactly. It's a mechanical thing. So that does make it easier as opposed to like if you're in the field of psychology or something really non-tangible and more esoteric in a way that requires language. That really it's harder to communicate with numbers or images maybe in those kinds of circumstances if professionals from that kind of area are trying to get their points across.
Yep, yep, exactly. You know what, Barb? I know this is going to be kind of new for you, but since you were talking about technology, AI, or getting into it, I'm going to share one video with you. Actually, it'd be two, but I want to share the first one right here. So give me a second. See, there we go.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Robert Thespian.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
This is a humanoid robot, which means it looks, it talks, and it even acts, well, like a human. So does that mean it could take a human's job like mine?
You better believe it. No, not really.
There's no denying robots and automation are increasingly part of our daily lives. Just look around the grocery store or the highway.
Well, Barb, I'm not going to get terribly into it. Obviously, you and I have spoken about this a little bit. Um, so with, and the funny part is, we mentioned this offline. That's like an 8-year-old video of the robot. So
Right.
with technology moving the way it is, I guess how how do you feel that it affects a person, I guess, in your field to help them out with communication and everything with these robots now? Um, I guess I would love to hear your interpretation of, I guess your perspective of how things are moving and it affects or doesn't affect your field.
I really don't know because I haven't paid a ton of attention to how automation might impact me as a communication skills coach. I obviously do use some AI in my work, but I guess somebody could make a robot that's just like me. It could have my voice, it could have my inflection and intonation. What it wouldn't have is my life experience, I suppose, which does impact how all of us communicate or interact. I hope we don't get to a world where everybody is a robot and robots are doing everything. Per- I certainly think there are places for them and things that they do well. Anything like heavy lifting or making things easier for humans. I think that's fabulous. I guess I would worry about they could probably speak more correctly than a lot of humans. There's a lot of miscommunication that goes on between humans because we don't speak effectively or we don't speak precisely. And you could program a robot to speak very precisely and very perfectly in a way. But I think in some way it would be boring or I don't know. For me, it would take away that human aspect of uh, interaction that is what makes relationships work and what's special about people interacting.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I was going to say, with AI coming the way it is, and they're starting to introduce these type of robots into the plants. How should I put this? The camaraderie with everybody that's in the facility, being able to work with different people, different cultures. I hate to say it, it's kind of like it might be going away if they keep going this direction. Um, I personally don't think that, how should I put this? Robots are a bad thing. In my opinion, what it helps do is that, uh, for example, repetitive task. A lot of companies try to looking at using a robot for that, mainly because it might be a heavy object, might be an awkward object. So that's where you want to put a robot there to be able to handle that. And this is where I say there's an opportunity for you to expand your business
Me.
because, well, what I mean is when I'm kind of getting the assembly lines, is that uh, you can there's tasks as part of the line where you need a human to do it, just because it might be this, might be that, and if you put that human there, you actually could, man, I could capture this business or I could capture this business because I freed that person up to be able to handle those tasks.
For sure. I think they're highly used in repetitive tasks, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. You don't want to make it do too much.
Yeah, I just heard I listened to a podcast about the level of automation going on in China. It's like phenomenal. And one of the reasons they pushed it so hard is because they didn't have enough people because of their one child policy. Um,
Yeah,
More than
yeah.
10
That's
years ago now that came to roost. And they just realized that the only way they were going to be able to be the type of manufacturing superpower that they wanted to be was to really nail automation, and apparently they really have. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, you definitely see some amazing stuff online, and at least over there. I kind of wonder how much of it is, how should I put this? I don't want to say the word fake, but just it make it sound better than what it actually is. And I'll give you an example of this. So, um, on the, like I mentioned, the other podcast I'm on, Automation Breakfast, there was a video uh, where they were paving a road, and all the robots were moving around, paving the road, nice and pretty and everything. But the catch is, like, okay, it's not snowing, it's not raining, it's a perfect sunny day, and it's doing its job. So what happens when it snows? What happens when it rains? What happens when you go through terrain? What happens when somebody kind of gets in the way? And humans, obviously, they read it, they see it, they sense it, they've done it for a long time. So that's the one thing I kind of I guess you say we were kind of somewhat skeptical about that, because they show it in a perfect condition, but when you get out of that perfect condition, that's where I would say that's where the real programmers come in. Because if you can make everything perfect just one way, you're gold. But if something happens, yeah, you gotta have somebody to be able to in there. Okay, we gotta take account this scenario, this scenario, this scenario. That way, it can get itself out into a safe spot.
Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
that's
Absolutely.
that's one thing. No, that's kind of cool. And I got one more AI one, because um, I found this interesting, and I'm like, man, I never thought this would happen in a school.
Mm.
And I'm kind of curious because obviously you're on the communication side, and obviously you're going to be coaching these young kids, for be better communicators. But I'll just play the video so you can see it. I'll show you what I'm alluding to.
Heard of. So a school is going to be completely AI with no teachers, and it's opening up in Chicago. Who are the students? They must be geniuses.
They're recruiting
no
students
way.
right now. The students are people of whose parents can afford $55,000 a year in tuition. I'll just say that for this private school. But this is a fascinating story on so many different levels. It's going to be called Alpha Schools. And Alpha Schools is a private school. I don't want to call it a chain, but it's a group of schools that exist in other states, formed out of Austin, Texas. And here's how the day works for these students. K through 8 right now, but eventually they want to make it K through 12. They do essentially all the core academic learning in 2 hours in those booths with AI. And it's very personalized. They interact with the AI. They learn their core subjects, reading, writing, arithmetic, and all the things that we learn. And then the rest of the day is left open to workshops, to entrepreneurial stuff, even for kids as young as 2nd and 3rd grade, business stuff, some arts as well. And that's where they really get their collaboration with other students and problem solving skills in. No
teachers. And I thought that was kind of crazy.
It sounds interesting. When you think about it, how much of a school day is not all that interesting. Obviously, I was in school a long time ago, and things were very, very different in the world in general at that time. But kids today spend so much time with devices and electronics, and this is how they get their information. This is how they interact with their friends. So I could see that for this generation, or that generation, that younger generation, that type of education might work better. And if they still get the interaction with other kids through the workshops or the sports or whatever it is, just that knowledge part, learning about the capitals of the states or whatever the information is, I think AI could be pretty good at that, actually.
I love the interpretation. I'm going to push back a little bit on that. So, because I how should I put this? I feel that students, if because AI is teaching them, they're going to fall into they're going to use AI to answer the AI's questions or the teacher's questions, and that's what's kind of happening already. Is that the students are relying more on AI, and unfortunately, they're not learning the subject. And so
I
I've
should think
seen
there'd be a way to prohibit that, wouldn't there?
there should be, but unfortunately, there's not.
Hmm.
That's the unfortunate part. Um, and I don't know how to get around it. To be honest with you, I when we were in school, that wasn't even an option. So
Not remotely. Not
yeah,
remotely.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, obviously, if it's AI teaching, AI the teacher, AI the respondent, it's only AI learning. So it's not the kid learning, and that's a very bad thing. I would assume in this kind of situation that there's some way that they are ensuring that the student is the one who is answering the question or their brain is being activated. Otherwise, it wouldn't be school. It would just
yeah.
be, you know,
Well,
I don't
I don't
know because
know.
I haven't read about it, but
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah. Unfortunately, I guess from what I'm seeing is, and unfortunately you see it online. Everybody's using AI for everything, even job interviews. It's kind of wonky.
yeah, I mean, I use it. I didn't know much about it and was kind of against it in the beginning. And now I have found that it can be very helpful for certain things. And I guess I do worry maybe that I'm using it too much and not, using my own brain, but it saves so much time. And frequently it gives me something that I can then tweak and massage and make my own or,
Yep.
at some level.
And sorry, I should elaborate a little bit. So what I was alluding to was, um, somebody asks you a typical interview question, and they just uh, let the AI hear it, and then they read off what it says. So that's what I was
Mhm.
alluding to. I don't know if you where because there's so many. I've seen so much stuff now. I know you're not in my area, but yeah, that's what I was alluding to. They're using it like that,
Yeah,
and
well, I mean, it's possible, isn't it? It's possible, and they may feel that AI is going to give them a better answer than they would come up with on their own. But if the employer is not aware that they're just reading this, I mean, I think that would be pretty easy to pick up if you're just reading an answer off. And then you get into the job situation and you have to be able to perform. And if
yeah,
AI can't necessarily perform for you if you've been untruthful about your capabilities and what you're able to do, and you get hired on the basis of false answers, at some point it would seem to me it's going to come home to roost.
yep, exactly, yep.
I
No,
hope.
no doubt. And yeah, we can kind of go off and on this one. So, um, I got another question for you, Barb.
Okay.
When companies, are rolling out these like new technologies, new process, new systems, what are some of the biggest communication mistakes that the leaders make?
I would say probably not being clear enough in telling people why they're doing what they're doing. If it's introducing a new technology, and especially, I guess, if it's one that would threaten people's jobs or indicate that maybe fewer people would be needed in the workplace, I think the company or the leaders have to make their case in a very clear, effective way. And typically that can follow a format of, this is the problem we're trying to solve. We see this technology as the solution. And here's the difference this technology is going to make. And that could be based on the bottom line. Maybe there is a bottom line reason why they feel that this solution is good for the business. It could be efficiency or quality related. This is going to give us a better quality output. But the key thing to keep in mind is that they need to be communicating with clarity And I would say also there's a role for empathy in here. If they are communicating something that is going to change the life of the people who are in the organization in some significant way, they need to communicate in such a way that that workforce understands that they're not just uncaring, unfeeling, that they, they realize maybe this will be difficult, or they realize that this is going to exclude some people. They need to make that explicit.
Yep. It's funny because there's tons of case studies out there. Exactly what you're alluding to is that you know sometimes it's really the rollout of a, let's say, a new line, and they need buy-in. Let's say, for example, from the plant or the people on the floor, because if unfortunately sometimes, and there's a bunch of case studies on it where they roll the new line into the plant, and the people that they want operating it are not buying in because it's new. What is this doing? How is this helping us? Da 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 da. And they receive a lot of resistance.
Hmm.
And it's better for, and we always say this as being done execution on new equipment. It's better to include the plant in the beginning, especially the people who are going to be working on it. They don't have to know every little detail because they just don't need to know every little detail. But I'm saying this from an engineering standpoint, but
Right.
get them involved early. That
Yeah.
way they know what's coming. Okay. And sometimes, the benefits to it, which I don't know if everybody knows this, is that, they know certain things because you're technically replacing an old process.
Mm-hmm.
They know certain things about that process, like, hey, did you guys think about this? Hey, did you guys think about that?
Right.
And you're like, oh crap, now we got to redesign. And yeah, trust me, I've seen oh crap, we didn't know about this, so then we have to do I guess you
An
say a reorder.
expensive redesign.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely getting people's input and involving them in the process early would be recommended for sure. Because you can't just spring something on people, like, oh, wow, look at this. Woo. That wouldn't go over big. Definitely.
Usually it doesn't, but it happens. It happens.
Yeah, I'm sure it happens. But yeah, making people feel like they're part of it would be definitely useful. It would
Yep.
serve the outcome in the end.
Yep. Exactly. So, Barb, I'm going to hit up the introvert. So, uh, when you're built real special, since you're a specialist around introvert leaders, what strengths do introverts bring to the organization often undervalue?
That's a really good question. And there's been so much written about this now that I hope they're not being undervalued to the same degree as they were being undervalued before this really became a topic of interest. But for me, the biggest thing is the thoughtfulness that introverts bring to the table. They don't just speak off the cuff. They have thought things through before they make their argument or put their point of view out there. And if people have the patience to wait for that, I think it brings great value to an organization or to the communication situation. They have that ability to take a moment and process and sometimes they even need to be explicit about the fact that they need that moment or the fact that they need that thinking time. It's not unacceptable to say something like, wow, this is the first time I'm hearing this. I need a minute. I need a little bit of time to think this through before I give an answer. Extroverts are more likely to just speak and think after they've spoken, and maybe they realize they misspoke, or maybe they realize they said too much at one time. So while they have the energy to show up in the room and to maybe command attention, whereas that's what the introvert has difficulty with, it's not everything that comes out of the extrovert's mouth when they have the floor is necessarily well thought through or, useful. And that's obviously a very gross generalization. There are extroverts who speak really well. So I don't want to give that impression that there aren't any. However, that ability to think something through and then give a thoughtful or considered answer, I think, is one of the things that introverts bring to the table.
Yeah, no, you bring up a great point, Barb. How should I put this? Well, me personally, I don't know if I'm an introvert or not, but I like to, process what I've just heard. And sometimes, and I kind of understand this, like from another person's perspective that's been dealing with it for, for the past, let's say 2 years or 6 months or some type of time frame, but they had a lot of knowledge of it. And obviously, you bring a new person in, you explain it to them, and they're trying to process it, and you're kind of like, well, this is the answer, and they're like, whoa, 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 just give me a minute, let me think about this real quick before
Mm-hmm.
before we say yes. And that's, sometimes that person has been working on it for so long, they don't necessarily see that, okay, you need to give them that time to process it so they can either get the buy-in or just have an understanding of what's coming. And how should I put this? I've been on both sides of the fence of this, personally, because I remember, um, I have an example. It'll be kind of, how should I put this? I'm not going to get into details because of proprietary reasons, but so there was like a design of a line, and I kind of let it function the way it was because it didn't meet spec. Then after a while, when other people got involved, they were like, okay, yeah, we don't really need to go that direction. We can work with the way it is. And then the question was to me, well, why didn't you fix it? And I'm like, well, because it was going to be, like Model A, and they didn't, now it's Model B, but I didn't try to make it right for Model B because we're going to change it, make it right for Model A. And now, and then now you guys saying, okay, we're going to stick with Model B, but it's not wired correctly. So now you're asking me right at this moment, why isn't this right? It's because we were supposed to go this direction.
Right. Well, and I think another thing that silence is very undervalued in our communication culture. It's even less valued in some others. Italians definitely undervalue silence. There's almost no silence in many Latinate languages, actually. But sometimes people don't have the patience, or they misinterpret that moment that introverts need to think as they don't know, or they don't have that ready answer. And that, I think, can be it can be a big miscommunication, because then the assumption of the other person is, oh, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. So when they do give that considered answer, it isn't given as much weight as maybe it deserves.
Yep.
So that can be another problem. Does that make sense?
Well, no, it does. It does. So I want to move on to the next question about cross cultures. So since you worked internationally for years, what do leaders most often misunderstand about communication across cultures, in your opinion?
Well, leaders in particular do often make the mistake of thinking that because they're the boss, people have to communicate their way. And that can often backfire. I can tell a little story about a guy named Frank. I did this intercultural training years ago on the island of Sardinia. And Alcoa was the name of the company at the time, who had purchased a state-owned steel company on the island of Sardinia. And they had sent this Aussie guy, Australian, named Frank, in as the manager of this facility. So here you have a culture where Italian state-owned company culture was highly hierarchical. Boss is the boss. What the boss says goes. You bow down to the boss practically, very, very hierarchical. What would you, autocratic,
Hierarchies.
I guess is the best
word.
Hierarchies.
Yeah.
And here comes Frank, who's very egalitarian. And he's down on the plant floor introducing himself to the workers on the floor. And he's like, call me Frank, just call me Frank. And they're like, Mr. So-and-so. I don't even remember Frank's last name. And he's like, no, you got to call me Frank. And he was trying to force these people, this workforce, into feeling like he was just one of them, when their whole entire work experience had been that the boss wasn't one of them, that the boss was up here and not on their level. And, he had a chauffeur and they made him a special lunch. And he was trying to talk everybody out of treating him that way because it was so uncomfortable for him. But what I would always tell leaders in that intercultural environment is that if you want people to be doing their best work, you should be the one who's a little bit uncomfortable in the communication so that they are comfortable and they will do their best work. If you've got everybody discombobulated because they're trying to figure out what you want and how you want to be communicated with, you're wasting energy and you're wasting potential of that workforce. So I think that's a mistake a lot of people make. They assume that because they go into this different environment, but they're the boss, they're the leader, people are going to have to adjust to them. And it's honestly far more productive that you're the one who makes the adjustments, so that because you're in their environment.
Yep. It's funny, Barb. The way you describe the hierarchy, my experience was in Asia, where it was very common there, where they have that
Right.
hierarchy.
Very hierarchical there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things I had to do is figure out, and luckily I had other people that been a part of that situation before. So their advice was, you need to find this person that's up here, because if you want this change to happen down here, you got to go talk with this person
Right.
in order for that change. So you're right. You got to adjust to the culture.
We used to have a diagram that we taught off of for working in hierarchical organizations, is that the communication had to happen between the two people at the same level. So if you were down here and you needed to communicate with another person down here, you needed to go up here and communicate with this person up here, who would then communicate down to this person. So it's this marching around kind of thing. But you can't, the lower level person can't go directly to the higher level person up here, because that doesn't work.
Yep.
So yeah, it's
an adjustment. Honestly, that's a great way of putting it. I never thought about it that way. That's as in the cross culture communication issue. Because I get what you meant about Frank. Like, hey, you just want to work with these guys because, in America, is that way. You work with the guys, like, okay,
right,
get along with them.
Be one of them, right? Yeah, get your hands dirty.
And it helps them hush up with this. Hush up with this. It helps with, motivation and, learning, sometimes, and I'm trying to think of a good example of this. So sometimes, the worker sees a situation different than the manager.
Right.
And so it's not necessarily the manager doesn't report it. It's just he interprets it a different way than what the worker shows, and then sometimes they just don't get it just because they're not really an expert in the field. So, for example, I'm more electrical. So if somebody comes up to me with a mechanical problem, I'm sort of gonna know what's going on, but okay, I need to grab the mechanical engineer or the process engineer to work with you on that side of it, because
right.
And
You don't
sometimes
completely speak the same language.
Yeah. And sometimes a leader just, sometimes it's better to grab somebody who's an expert instead of trying to, manage it yourself. So it happens.
Well, and there are all different kinds of leaders and managers. Somebody who's a micromanager probably would have a more difficult time crossing cultures, because they're not going to be able to they're not going to understand everything that's going on in order to micromanage it. So that could be very uncomfortable for somebody who has that style. Whereas somebody who is a little bit more hands-off and allowing people to do what they do, it could be easier, because they're just going to allow those people to continue to do what they do in their own language and in their own way, as long as it's effective, obviously. And then they get the report out, or, they can see the bigger picture, which might be their job.
Well, Barb, I got two last questions for you.
Okay.
So I know I didn't give you these, so I'm just gonna
Oh, you
go
didn't
with
give
it.
me these. Oh,
Yep. So,
tricky.
well, yep, they're tricky. So the first one is, if someone's a young entrepreneur is looking to get in your field, what advice would you give them?
Somebody who wants to become a communication coach?
Yes.
Well, experience. You just need to do a lot of different things. I've done a lot of teaching, so that is one thing that also allows me to be the coach or the person who presents, because I've been in front of a lot of rooms. I've done a lot of communicating myself. I would say anything that helps you build the communication muscle, because coaching obviously also is a lot about listening. It's a lot about hearing that person and helping them understand how they're coming across. A good skill to build is how to give good feedback, how to give direct and honest feedback, but in a very human way. I think that's another key skill. So I guess it would be, I came to it, I don't have a degree in communication, and I don't know that you need one. It's just having the passion for helping people become good communicators, and, realizing that you have that passion.
Yep. No, I definitely see that. And I was going to say, you brought up some good points there because, you know, being a good communicator, it's tough. It really is.
It is.
It's extremely tough because, it's a skill I had to learn, to be honest with
Mhm.
you. And, you get it from experience, you get it from talking with everybody. And you learn, like I said, um, you got to adjust. Like you brought up earlier, you got to adjust to the culture. Um, for example, you know, in the Midwest, a culture is a little different than like North Carolina or South Carolina or Texas or Florida.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You have to tune in. You
Yep.
have to tune in. I mean, it could be that AI is going to make my type of work obsolete. I don't know, but
I doubt that. I mean, it's here's the thing. Kind of go off topic a little bit. Uh, I always say AI should be used as a tool.
yes,
It's not
definitely.
a say all be all. And unfortunately, I think some people are using it as a say all be all instead of just a tool.
Right, for sure. And it may get them into trouble. We don't know.
Yeah, it may. It may.
Could.
um, so, Barb, my last question to you is, if somebody wants to contact you, what's the best way of contacting you?
Well, I have a website, boltglobal.com, and there are lots of ways to get in touch with me there. I'm also on LinkedIn. I think as Barbara A. Boldt on LinkedIn, and you can always direct message me through LinkedIn. So yeah, I'm pretty available. I'm not impossible to find.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Barb, it's been great, and just want to tell the audience, hey, like, subscribe. You have any questions for Barb? You know where to get a hold of her. I'll definitely put her website link and her LinkedIn link on the post. So I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you, Barb. I appreciate you jumping on and giving
Thank
your
you very much.
perspective on communication. Thank you, thank you.
It's great to get your perspective on automation. Great conversation. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you, thank you.